grace and peace. Welcome to Find the Intersection. My name is Paul Dezay, and we're ready to get started. So today is December 31st, and it's the beginning of this Bible reading plan for all of 2019. And so we're ready to start today. I know it's a day early, but let's get started on the right foot as we go into this new year. So today's passage is Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and read the Bible in a couple translations, that particular passage, and then come back here and I'll share some insights that I have from this passage. All right, go. Hey, welcome back. Today we're talking about Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. Matthew 2, 1 to 12. Let's jump into the context today. We're talking about Matthew's gospel. Matthew was a tax collector who became a disciple of Jesus, and he is writing this passage, which is typically known as the Wiseman visitation to Jesus. We don't know the amount of time that has taken place since the other stories associated with Christmas and the birth of Christ. So it could be just several days, or it could be a lot longer. They're typically associated together in most Christmas plays within church, but that's not necessarily the case here. It doesn't say they were in a stable, that they were in a house in Bethlehem. So maybe some time has passed. But that's the context in which we're talking about. This particular text is noted as a key reading in the Sunday or the holy day of Epiphany, which is really the second most significant holy day within traditional Christianity. Christmas is snuck in there and kind of taken over the number 2 spot. But back in the day, in the earliest of Christian history, Epiphany was the second. And it's associated with the revelation, that's what the word epiphany means, revelation of Jesus as the Savior to the Gentiles. And so we'll get into that in a second. But that's the context. And by the way, this coming Sunday is Epiphany Sunday on the Christian calendar. All right, the wise men. So the wise men really kind of jump out here to us. We've heard the story so many times, but sometimes when we know the story the most, we actually know the least about it because it's become so familiar. So things like, we don't know how many wise men there were. The text does not say. We typically associate 3 wise men because of the 3 gifts, but the text doesn't say. It doesn't say their names, even though history kind of associates some names here. And also, we don't know exactly where the wise men are from. We just know they're from the east, which really the only thing scholars would agree on here is that the wise men were probably Gentiles. And that is connections to other scriptures we'll talk about later in this week. So the wise men brings gifts to Jesus. They go to King Herod first, and we'll talk about the King Herod in a second. But they bring gifts to Jesus, and the gifts are gold, which traditionally gold is associated to a gift to a king. The second gift is frankincense, and incense is typically given to a deity, part of worship. And third, myrrh is typically a burial spice, embalming fluid. So it's given to somebody who is mortal, who will die one day. And so that would be held back to be used for the person's funeral. So those gifts really are about the wise men presenting gifts because they worship and value Jesus, who they believe is the King of the Jews. Now, those traditional meanings of gold going to king, etc., are good, and I agree with them. But I think the key part of this particular section of the gospel is about generosity, and the wise men are giving generously in worship to the one who has been given as a gift to all humanity, and that's Jesus. And so generosity, I believe, is the key virtue that runs through the passage. It's not necessarily the gifts as much as the generosity. All right, so the second thing that jumped out to me was King Herod. I mean, he's the bad guy in this passage, and King Herod is so insecure when it comes to his position as king that he's willing to slaughter innocent children to protect his throne. King Herod is compared to Pharaoh in this particular case. And actually, through Matthew's gospel, there is definitely this Jesus being the second Moses coming to lead a second Exodus. And so King Herod is one of the bad guys in this particular book who's associated with Pharaoh. So King Herod tells the wise men to report back, and they do not. They follow home, and King Herod is left to take matters into his own hands and the slaughtering of the infants. But I think the most important thing for me in this passage was that the wise men signify to us that the gospel is for everyone. Here is wise men that came from afar to worship Jesus. Wise men would have been Gentiles, and in that case, in the early Christian church, the ones who would have been reading the Gospels, Mark first and then Matthew and Luke, they would have believed that the gospel was for Jews and that Christians had to convert to Judaism to be followers of Jesus. And Paul writes quite a bit about that in his letters. But it's important for us to recognize that the gospel is for everyone. Everybody's included, is invited to seek Jesus. And we'll get more into it because the passages that we read the rest of this week have some direct ties into this passage, and I'm excited to share in the conversation with you. So what did you come up with in this particular passage? Would you share in the comments or share on the Facebook group and let us know what you came up with, because I believe that God is going to speak to everyone through these passages, and it's important that we learn from one another. All right, that's it for today. We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be talking about the New Testament passage from Ephesians. And then throughout the week, we'll continue to go. And then Friday, we'll find the themes that run through all the passages. Have a great week, everybody, and Happy New Year.